Hi everyone. Hi, welcome to the Fangs for Christmas author panel, where we're going to explore the vampire myth as it appears in modern paranormal romance and urban fantasy. I am Moda, and I am here with Jeaniene Frost, who is a best-selling New York Times, USA Today, and international author. She, among her series, are of course the Night Huntress series, the Night Prince series, and the Broken Destiny. Jeaniene now lives in Maryland, together with her husband and her two very adorable dogs. Hi, Jeaniene, how are you?
Hi.
I'm also here with Scarlett Sinclair. Hi, Scarlett, who is a citizen of the Muskogee Nation, and she is the author of the Hades and Persephone, the Hades Saga, and the very vampiric King of Battle and Blood. As a librarian, Scarlett has a unique point of view on research, and we're looking forward to having her here. I'm very excited. Our hosts today almost need no introduction. They're Ilona and Gordon Andrews, who co-authored together under Ilona Andrews. Amongst their series are the Kate Daniels series, which is kind of a establishing cult point in the urban fantasy genre, and then the Hidden Legacy and Innkeeper Chronicles. Ilona and Gordon currently live in Texas with their two children and many, many pets. I'm so sorry, Ilona and Gordon, about that impaling video I sent last night. Never mind. And hi, everyone who's joining from all over the world. Hello. There will be so many of you today. So I'm going to talk to you very, very quickly, and then I'll shut up. The structure of our chat will be about an hour of general talk and, of course, topics about vampires. And then the last half an hour will be a spoiler session, which I will announce very clearly so that nobody who doesn't want to hear spoilers gets to hear spoilers. The goodies that we have will be shared before that spoiler session, so everyone gets to them. If you want to ask questions for the authors on live, can I please ask you to put them in the Q&A tab, which you can see at the bottom of your screens, rather than the chat, because yeah, there's a lot of you today. And then another thing that I am very happy to announce is that in order to make this panel as close to a real live author panel that we all miss, the authors have partnered with a bookstore, and you will be able to order books with a personalized sort of event tag for Thanks for Christmas. And then I will, this is from Bank Square Books, and I'll go now in the chat and I will post the link of where you can get the book. There you go. Now, I think I've covered everything. I am Moda. In my day life, I am moderator to Ilona and Gordon's blog, but today I'm here as someone who was born and raised in Transylvania. So I am going to talk for my people, the vampires. Which I am only slightly joking, because actually we are all here to talk about vampires today. We love vampires. And our first topic is actually why we love vampires so much. The evolution of the creature from monster to hero. So the first appearances of the vampires in folklore around the world are as this parasitic monster who comes and feeds on the lifeblood and life energy of the living. And Ilona and Gordon, in Kate Daniels, you sort of showed us an aspect of this with the immortus pathogen creatures. I want to ask you, what made you research and portray that version of the vampire, especially in a time where it was mostly angsty heartthrob vampires that were all the rage?
I'm not sure, actually. We didn't want to do a pretty boy vampire. We knew for sure. We felt like there were people who have done it so much better than we would. And it was just interesting to have them as really mindless monsters. We haven't seen that before, to where they were almost like insect-like. We just, you know, and then when we added that aspect of necromancers piloting them around like remote cars, it gave this really odd feeling to where you are talking to a monster and yet the necromancer's voice is coming from their mouth. And you know this guy is sitting somewhere far away, sipping coffee, you know, munching on Toblerone or something. And he's like, yeah, I killed this guy with my vampire and that guy with my vampire. It just added that little, I don't know, otherness, alienness to it. I'm not sure how to describe it. What do you think, honey?
I think some of it is probably due to your Slavic background, where old-time Slavic vampires were not as smooth or probably sexy.
Oh gosh, they were no puri, Russian puri. They were really big on consent. They were like, come to see me at the crossroads of your own free will, or your mother will die tomorrow. You don't have to come, but I'm gonna kill your relatives.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think of the first that really old black and white vampire movie, like
Nosferatu. Yes.
Yeah. Like, that to me would be a more accurate.
Absolutely. That's actually how I refer to the Immortus pathogen vampires. Whenever I talk to someone, I call them the Skittles Nosferatus, because you have them painted in all the sunscreen colors.
Yeah, I mean, even what we do in Shadows, the movie, especially the oldest vampire, is not even human at that point anymore. Like, he's completely
just the creature,
like, even the other vampires are scared of. So I could see it going that way, to where after a while, just the humanity, whatever you had of it, is lost.
I guess we went the monster route.
Yeah, we did. We went monster rather than hero.
And Scarlett, in The King of Battle and Blood, you not only have the sort of more traditional Byron type of vampire, but you also have all these monsters that he actually hunts, which are all iterations of vampires from across the world, from like Lamia to Strigoi and everything else. Like, how did you think to have everyone together? Not one big happy family because they're killing each other, but
that's funny. I didn't think about that. Yeah, well, when I was doing research just generally on vampires, I came across this really cool encyclopedia, and the author calls herself a vampirologist. And I thought, I didn't know. I was like, did you make that up? But anyways, it's very interesting because she talks about how all vampires are different across cultures based on that culture's fears. So when I was thinking about crafting this world, I wanted to create a world, create a monster or monsters that reflected their fears, and their fears are obviously being overpowered by, these creatures. So they're just sort of out there in abundance. And I thought that was very interesting. And I had never thought about creatures like, Lamia from Greek mythology. She hunted her children. She went mad and hunted her children, and I never thought about that as like a vampiric entity. So I thought that was very interesting to bring to the surface, like Striga as well. Like you think of them separate from being like the vampire that we know. Maybe that's because the vampire myth that we think of is always Dracula, which is very odd, I think, in Western culture. But yeah, so I thought that was a really cool way to be like, actually, a lot of things can be considered a vampire.
That's true. And since you brought up Vlad, of course, Jeaniene, you give us a reimagination of Vlad and a bit of a, am I right in saying like all your vampires are sort of anti-heroes rather than the typical romantic heartthrob dashing hero?
I guess. It wasn't what I intended to start out doing. You start out, with your idea of a character and you go from there. I wasn't trying to do the anti-hero versus another type. It's just these, in my mind, that was who the characters were. And when I started writing about vampires, I swore to myself I would never write about Vlad and Dracula because it had just been done to death, pun intended, and I had nothing new to add, and I was absolutely not going to do it. And then in my third Night Huntress book, all of a sudden my hero Bones hears someone coming and he says, oh, it's the bloody showhound. And I knew it was Vlad. And he showed up on page kind of against my will. But copped into my head fully formed and hating the name Dracula. And as a writer, when you have a character kind of just pop into your brain, bringing its own story, you know, yeah, you jump on it, because the other times you're at your keyboard crying, saying, who wanted to write this shit? Oh, pardon language, children, sorry. Anyway, so that's how Vlad turned out to me. And I knew I couldn't make a cinnamon roll hero out of him. So, you know, I went with the historical version of him that showed him as, yes, cruel, but not more so for the time period that he was in, and more kind of clever because he was outnumbered against the forces he was facing. So he went with psychological warfare because he didn't have anything else. You know, he didn't have the numbers, and he was trying to protect his country against a much larger invading empire. So that's the version I went with, and cherry picked basically the stories about him for the character that I was going to make once I resigned myself to the fact that I was going to write about him.
That's brilliant. And since we are talking about Vlad, so really nobody else that comes to mind has done the journey from monster to hero quite as much as Vlad has. Since House Andrews don't really work with Vlad as an inspiration, Ilona will be the voice of history today, and she will give us a brief intro into the real life Vlad Tepes, Vlad Dracula, or Vlad Dracula, as he is best known to international audiences. And he was the ruler of the Romanians of Wallachia. So Ilona, please, you will be speaker and have the scene.
Right, yay. Let's see if I can.
You can do it.
I can do it. Oh no. Let's see. Share screen. Oh, I can't. You have disabled the screen sharing.
No. Oh, panelists, here we go.
Oh, right. Excellent. Okay. So we are going to medieval Europe, 15th century. This is going to be amazing. So this is a terribly cruel, horrible age. Like, you know, this is going to be like Game of Thrones, except not as gentle and kind. It's like, yeah, J.R. Martin, hey, Red Wedding. Medieval Europe is like, oh, bless your heart, hold my beer. So this is a mess that is medieval Europe, into which Vlad was born. So as you can see, like we can zoom in a little bit here. Let's see, put little letters. Scotland, yes. All right, do you see this mess? This is France, the modern France, right? Like you can't even tell what's going on here, right? But we are basically interested mostly in this region. So you will see Hungary, like a big juggernaut here, and then we'll see Wallachia, Moldavia, Transylvania. Okay, so that's where we're going to be playing with. At this point in Europe, there's basically two large powers, right? There's the Holy Roman Empire, which is not Roman. It's actually kind of like a medieval version of European Union, right? Pope is in charge, you know, he's a spiritual leader. And there is a Holy Roman Emperor, who usually ends up basically with the capital either in Germany or in Hungary. And then on the other hand, we have this enormous empire here, which is the Ottoman Turks. You see them, there they are. So the Ottoman Turks, in reality, you know, when we think of Turkey, we think of like, oh, it's a little nation somewhere around like Mediterranean, Black Sea, somewhere out there, right? During this time, Ottoman Turks are incredibly powerful. They're a military juggernaut. They're well organized. They have a really good army, and they're keen to expand. They want to go. So I'm going to kind of go back to the Zoom here for a second, if I'm allowed. So new share, we're gonna do a new share here. It's probably not gonna let me do it now. Hold on.
You can do it.
I can do it, yay.
You got
All
this,
right.
bro.
Yeah, the problem is I've got this thing covering my tab here. But basically, let's see.
They smart.
I'm trying. Oh, my presentation is
There you
not.
go.
Oh, I got it. Can you see this lovely map I made? Okay, so everything that's red is the Holy Roman Empire. Everything that's blue is the Turks. You can see right between them, we have sandwiched Wallachia, where Vlad is going to basically eventually become the ruler. So to really understand Vlad, you have to kind of start with his dad. His father was an illegitimate son of a powerful king. At a very early age, he was also named Vlad II. At a very early age, Vlad II is sent to Hungary to the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund. Sigismund basically educates Vlad at his court, and he indicts him into the Order of Dragon, which is a special knightly order that Sigismund made specifically to fight the Ottoman Turks. It's very prestigious. You have to be a royal or really high-ranking noble to be in one. So he basically eventually, releases Vlad II, who goes on home and becomes the ruler with the voivode, the official title of the king. But unfortunately, Sigismund dies. He's old, right? He dies, and with his death, the support of Hungary and the Holy Roman Empire kind of crumbles. So Vlad II is left sitting here with the enormous, basically, wolf of Turkey sharpening its fangs and looking at him. At this point, Turkey is treating this entire region as their playground. They're asking for monetary tribute, economic tribute. They're asking for 500 children to be sent to them every year. This is a tribute that these countries must pay to them. Obviously, the children are either become into the members of the Turkish army, or they're sold into slavery. None of it is good. So this region is really, really suffering, and they have no resources with which to oppose the Ottoman Empire. So Vlad II tries to make nice with the Turks. At this point, and I'm going to consult my notes here so I don't lie about the dates. In 1431, Vlad Dracula, the future Vlad Dracula, is born. And when he's 11 years old, his father, Vlad II, is betrayed. And basically, he ends up having to be summoned to Turkey to face the Sultan, Murad II. And Murad II tells him, you come here yourself, you bring 2 children with you, your 2 younger sons. So he leaves his oldest son to rule in his stead, brings Vlad and his brother Radu with him.
Radu the Handsome.
Yeah, future Radu the Handsome.
And Radu the traitor.
Yeah, Radu the traitor also. We're getting to that. This is getting juicy. Hold on. So basically, the kids, they go to Turkey and they're immediately imprisoned. Eventually, Vlad II is released and sent back to rule over his kingdom, but the 2 boys stay. And the 2 boys are basically imprisoned in the citadel in Anatolian plains. It's an extremely harsh environment, and they're subjected to what by modern standards would be horrific child abuse. They're starved, they're beaten. Basically, they go through a rigorous meat grinder that makes Turkish soldiers into the unstoppable force that they are. They witness a great deal of cruelties. They witness impaling, which impaling at that point was kind of standard. Let's just, so we don't make anybody into a bad guy. Yes, Turkey impaled people. Also, Moldavia impaled people.
Doesn't the impaling make them a bad guy?
Everybody's a bad guy. Like, there's no good guy. In Russia, they're chaining people to the horses and sending them in different directions. In Europe, we're burning people alive. Mongols have layered their captives down, built a wooden platform on top of them, and they're having dinner. So this whole thing is just horrid. Like, the atrocities that are occurring cannot be basically imagined by a modern person in a modern society. But Vlad, as a child, is exposed to all of that. He is watching people basically die on a stake, because impaling itself involved was kind of a complicated process, but basically they impaled you in such a way that they missed your vital organs. So you you died slowly on a stake. It was similar to crucifixion in the way it kind of worked. So basically, he witnesses all of this terribleness. He becomes incredibly proficient in martial arts. He becomes incredibly good warrior, right? And he hates the Turks, just hates them absolutely. Meanwhile, his brother grows up to be Radu the Handsome. And Radu the Handsome ends up having a relationship with the future Sultan, Mehmed II. It is fairly established fact that they were in a romantic relationship for a majority of basically their lives. We can only speculate as to, motivations for those relationships. Whatever it was, by all accounts, they were a couple. So Vlad uses as a complete betrayal. Then when he's 17 years old, his father is betrayed by the lords, feudal lords of Wallachia. He is killed and his oldest brother is buried alive. The Turks release Vlad, he goes back home to rule. His rule lasts about 6 months because the same nobles that basically, killed his dad, pulled him off the throne. But he rallies, he comes back, he takes the throne the second time, and that's what really begins the reign of Vlad Dracula. He takes his name from his father. His father was indicted in the Order of the Dragon, right? And Dragon at that point was very closely associated with the devil in Romania. And so, he was basically Vlad the Devil, Vlad the Dragon, and Vlad Dracula was basically the son of Vlad Dracul. That's how they went, okay? So Vlad Dracula takes the throne. He becomes proves himself to be a brilliant commander, very good ruler from the economic standpoint. Wallachia prospers under his rule. Unprecedented economic growth, unprecedented basically code of law. He's incredibly terrible to his enemies. He hates betrayal. He punishes betrayal with incredible cruelty. Over 500 nobles have been basically impaled during his reign for betraying basically people. But as a true dragon, it's that saying, it's warm under the wing of the dragon. He is very, very loyal to his soldiers. He gives them houses, he gives them money, he takes care of them. So, you either love him or you hate him. That's kind of relationship. His reign itself is marked by war against the Turks. In one very notable battle, Mehmed II came into the Wallachia, basically 250,000 troops. Vlad met him with 30,000 troops, most of whom were farmers and young boys, and he won. But it is also marked by great atrocities. Like I said, one of the things that Mehmed II encountered was thousands of people impaled on his way, which Vlad had done. So he's both the monster and the hero at the same time. But the real legend of Vlad Dracula begins when he gets into a pissing match with Saxon merchants. You have to understand that Saxon merchants at this point are trading all over Europe. And they're trading all over Europe pretty much scot-free. Nobody taxes them, they do whatever they want. So they try to trade in Wallachia, as they have done for years and years and years. And Vlad said, no, you know what, we're gonna tax you. And Saxon merchants said, oh no, let's not do that. We're not gonna pay any taxes. He said, okay, well, I will impale you. He impaled him. So then basically, it's like, what do you expect, right? So Saxon merchants end up writing this huge letter to the current king of Hungary, saying things like, oh my God, he eats children, he drinks blood, he sits there and dies while people are dying on the stakes. He is this horrible, terrible monster. He drinks blood for dinner, just this horrible thing. The current king of Hungary had a problem. The Pope sent him a bunch of money to fight the Turks. He didn't fight the Turks. He used the money to fight some other separate war that he was involved in, right? And for his administrative expenses. So he has to account for where all this money went. And suddenly there's a letter from Vlad Dracula, about Vlad Dracula, how Vlad Dracula is so bad. And so he's like, okay, let's pin it on that dude. So very quickly, there were some fabricated documents that alleged that Vlad misappropriated the money, and they ended up imprisoning him for 12 years. He was in prison. At the end of those 12 years, the Turks were kind of getting really bold. The king of Hungary needed somebody to fight him. So he releases Vlad. Vlad is at that point is either 45 or 49 years old. It depends on which historical source you go with, right? And so he's released from prison. He's once again the voivode of Wallachia. And he just, you know, he leads his troops into this big battle against the Turks. And as a result of it, he's killed. They feared him so much that after he died, they cut his body into pieces to make sure he didn't get up, back up, right? And they cut off his head and sent the head to Mehmed II because he wanted the actual proof that Vlad Dracula was dead. As far as his romantic lives, we know that he was married 2 times, possibly 3. But his greatest love, he had one. Her name was, let's see if I can find where she is, Katharina Siegel, I'm sorry, I probably mispronounced it. And she was the daughter of a Weavers Guild leader. They had 5 children together. They were together for over 20 years, and he basically loved her until he died. That kind of becomes, you know, that is the history of Vlad Tepes. As years roll by, you know, his legend grows, and eventually he becomes associated with vampires, with blood drinkers, with monsters. And that's how we end up with the Vlad Dracula of today. Yay, I have gotten through my
Yay!
Okay.
An exceptionally accurate portrayal of Vlad, who we must all remember, he was indeed a historical character. Somebody the other day said, oh, he's on par with Bugs Bunny. He very much is not. He was an actual person who is a national hero in my country. And but we have to remember that when an author starts working with them and has inspiration, they literally rebuild the character. They reinvent, and it's someone's idea in their head. So we're not looking at historical accuracy basically when we speak about fictional Vlad Dracula. So there we go. Thank you again, Ilona. That was brilliant, and I think it made everyone understand a bit the context and the cruelty in which we discuss Vlad. And
I am shutting up now efficiently, and I'm gonna turn everything over to the nice ladies who actually do Vlad. Just so you know, guys, we do all of our research for this, right? Even when fiction authors, you know, it change things, and they use history as a springboard to do it. We don't just like mix stuff up usually, you know. But you know, everybody's blood is different. So I'm shutting up, and bye.
She muted herself. I loved it. I'm like, can you teach more history, please?
Absolutely. So now I think we're firmly in the camp of we understand where vampires came in, and we understand how they went from the monsters to the heroes that we have. And once they're established as heroes, and romantic heroes in particular, they of course need, what do they need? They need a love interest. So what I found very interesting is that all of you have created for your vampire heroes the archetype of the warrior woman. Now, they're very different warrior women, Isolde, Kat, and Maud, but they are the same archetype. So I'm going to start with Scarlett, because actually, without giving too much away, there is a little bit of a duality to Isolde. Like, she is the warrior woman, but Adrian also knows her as a different kind of power woman. So can you walk us a bit through that and tell us a bit if you always envisioned your hero being in love with the Isolde that he sees in front of him, or being in love with the duality?
I've always just it's in my brain, it's always been the person in front of him. But I know I've seen the feedback. I've seen the fear among readers that is not the case. So I thought that was very interesting, and it had never occurred to me that he would not be in love with the person in front of him. But it's fine. I don't know that I don't know that I separated the two, like her duality. I think of her as always a strong female character, right? Someone who can survive in this very harsh world. And that was sort of how I crafted her, like, who's going to survive in this world? What would she look like? And I don't think I think of them as you know, like two separate entities. So that is it's kind of hard to talk about this, right?
Yeah, without giving too much away. I mean, it is interesting,
yeah.
really, that you have the vampire who is primed as a figure. Of course, they're immortal. They know all this kind of information. They have the aristocratic status, usually. They have the wealth that they accumulated. So they're really primed to be in a sort of couple relationship that is not balanced. And yet, all the authors that we have in front of us today have created this representation of the female figure that is very much on par with her vampire lover. Jeaniene, I know you have a surprise coming for us in spring of 2022. You have Bones and his point of view, the other half of the grave. What are we going to learn about Cat through Bones's eyes that we don't know yet?
I mean, gosh, it's different because writing through his eyes is it was a surprise for me at first. And you know, at first I only did it for fun. I wrote a couple chapters, I posted them on my blog. And, you know, I thought, oh, me and 10 other people will be excited about this, because the Night Huntress series ended back in 2014, you know, or 10,000 years ago after pandemic timeline. Anyway, so I got a lot of reader response by it. So I wrote a little more, and then I really enjoyed writing it. And I started really hearing Bones's voice in my head in a way that I hadn't when I was writing him through Cat's eyes. So I ended up writing the whole damn book after I was done with my other deadlines. And I'm now posting more free chapters on my website. So if you didn't read the other chapters, there's like 18 of them up now, and I'm posting them with contests through the month of December. So here is your shameless promotion plug of free reading and contests in this month on my website. But, you know, I learned, one of the things I can say without it being a spoiler that I learned about Bones that I did not realize was how much he hated her friggin' mother. Because I always liked Justina. I always had a lot of sympathy for her. And in writing Bones, I realized he has seething hatred just under the surface that he is constantly biting his tongue about. And that was a surprise. And also just a little bit more of the world he was in, and his time as a hitman, because it was really only something that was kind of glossed over through Cat's eyes. And you have to see this. I see people like, we hate Justina too. I know. I still liked her. I still do. But yeah, it's just, you know, you change the lens. It's like a kaleidoscope. You change one thing and the whole picture can look different. So, Cat does look different through his eyes, and also the world, the vampire world, looks a little different through his eyes, because when we see it through hers, she's experiencing it for the first time, and we see it through his, and he knows all of the intricacies and the restrictions and you know, the societal limitations of vampires that she is unaware of, and he's trying to navigate all that while falling in love and going up against a very powerful, very evil enemy. So that's my take on that. Yeah, I think I lost my train of thought, but that happens a lot.
It was
Ask Ilona.
really fascinating.
We'll be talking and I'll be like, squirrel, and yeah, and conversation gets derailed.
I will unmute now. I will ask Ilona to unmute herself. You can make Gordon speak if you want. So of course, when it comes to the vampire's love interest, you again played with the tropes, because that's what Ilona Andrews do. Someone said Ilona Andrews never writes straight up trope. So you trolled our land a little bit, your dashing intergalactic vampire warlord. He's introduced to us as having a little bit of a fascination with human women, in particular with what he perceives as their fragility and helplessness, and oh, they don't wear armor. And then, of course, enter Maud.
Maud.
Well, I mean, I do think initially he was interested in Dina, but it just wasn't a suitable match. And
Yeah.
Ma, like, I think, like you said, it was almost an infatuation with Dina for maybe the things that she wasn't, you know. And then there's Maud, who is almost very, very different than her sister. You know, she is a warrior. She is physically powerful. You know, Dina out to the end is kind of just a regular person. But like Maud, wherever she is, she's a badass.
Yeah,
I mean,
more
Dina definitely awoke him to a different type of power, because it
Yeah.
seemed like at that point he would only recognize the martial power, the, you know, armored vampire, Ilomena, his
ultimately-
mother's type of power.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what he ended up with. I think maybe he was more comfortable, could understand that power better.
It's just, you know, it did not compute for him, because the first time he sees Maud, he literally freezes. Like there's a brawl going on and he's staring sitting there like open mouth, like Judd, staring at her, because she's like, it's a weird scene for those who have not read the Maud thingy. So basically it's like Maud is Dina's sister. She ends up exiled with her very small child to this horrible, basically space colonial Australia. It's
Hell.
It's a hellish planet,
Yeah.
right? And so she's in this canteen, basically a hive of scum and villainy, right, with her daughter, kind of awaiting to be rescued after having, you know, been on this planet for a year and a half or 2 years. And so you know, Dina finds out where she is. She comes to rescue her. She brings her boyfriend Sean, who's a werewolf, and she brings Arlan, who is the night marshal of House Clair. The vampires in this world live in night houses. They're knights, basically. It's complicated. Anyway, so, you know, there's this massive brawl that breaks out in there, and Maud decides that, you know, she has to cut her way to the door and to her sister. So she jumps on the table, runs around, stabs a guy, cuts somebody's head off, you know, kicks somebody in the face. And Arlan is just standing like, oh, to the point to where at some point Dina screams at him, like, your lordship, help my sister.
Yeah.
You know, and then he's like, whips out his music, goes raw, and, you know, then eventually somebody films all of his fighting in the canteen and it goes viral. Actually, gets several offers of marriage after that. But our vampires are just not very conventional. I'm sorry. It's hard to explain. You were talking about the duality. For Maud, there is quite a bit of duality. She is human, yet she ended up kind of adopting the requirements of vampire society, because originally she was in love with the vampire. She married him. She went to his planet. Horrible mother-in-law. You know, and so there's a real conflict for her. Like, is she human? Is she a vampire? Is she a human who is trying to out vampires? Like, you know, this is kind of a thread that runs through her character.
But the thing is, I think part of that because of her daughter, she can't
Yeah, her daughter is
completely,
half, yeah.
her daughter being half, kind of like, you know, Jeaniene's cat, she can't, I think there's part of her that doesn't want to completely cut her daughter off from that part of her,
yeah,
her culture or her ancestry.
yeah.
I guess.
It's like
Because if she rejects everything vampire in a way, she's also rejecting
her daughter.
her daughter.
Yes, and so it's kind of this complicated thing. It has a lot to do, surprisingly, with choices we make as parents, kind of for the sake of our children, and the associated guilt, and, you know, questioning whether or not you were right, all this stuff. Okay, I rambled.
So I see quite a lot of people, thank you so much, Ilona and Gordon. I see quite a lot of people asking about the link to the book, to the signed book purchases. I've pasted it a few times. If you skip it in the chat, guys, don't worry. It will be available on, I believe, all the authors' blogs. So whoever sent you here, you can go on their blog and you can find the link to the purchase. And then you also want the link to the maps and all the research, and we're going to do all that as well. We're going to share highlights of everything. So Ilona, you touched a little bit when you spoke about your non-conventional vampires. The other thing I wanted to discuss with all of you is that you each chose very different world build and sort of surrounding for your vampires. Scarlett, you have a more traditional kind of pseudo-medieval world setting. Jeaniene, of course, you have contemporary vampires, as anti-hero as they are and as long-lived as they are. They're still firmly characters of our day. And Ilona and Gordon, you do futuristic space vampires that, you know, they're the trope play. So why do you all think that vampires are so versatile? Scarlett, do you have any idea why they lend themselves to so much?
Well, I think I'll just maybe default to an answer I sort of gave earlier, which is like they really do represent just a very intriguing fear of humanity, I think, and maybe like internal humanity, like like how we can become monsters in some ways, because I think like the really cool, again, I think we're talking about duality, but in all these instances we kind of see like how humans are also the monsters. So there's no, like, that term can be applied to absolutely anyone. So I think that's the intriguing part, is like through these people we sort of explore our own monstrosity, and I maybe could be very wrong.
I don't think there's only one correct answer. And Jeaniene, of course, you've chosen contemporary vampires, which sort of we all know were kind of the revival of the contemporary vampire as a romantic hero. Owes a lot to Anne Rice, who we sadly lost last weekend. So what made you choose the contemporary setting for your vampires, for your anti-hero vampires?
I mean, it wasn't a conscious choice. I just, when I got the idea for the first novel that I ever wrote, the idea was about a half vampire and a full vampire arguing about why she'd left him years before, and it just came to me as a contemporary setting. So that's what I jumped off of when I wrote it. So it was less of a conscious decision and more, this is how the idea came to me. And I also like I love playing with the what if question. You know, you look around, you see a shadow. Is it a person? Is it something more? You know, I love the idea of there's more beneath the surface than we see, even in this world that we think is so normal and we think we understand so much about. Maybe we don't know nearly as much as we think we do. And the fun part about vampires and one of their allure, and I'm going to date myself and go all the way back to the 80s movie Swamp Thing, when one of the character, I think the character became Swamp Thing, said, you know, the serum or whatever changed and said, it doesn't change who you are, it increases it. And that's kind of the same premise I went along with vampires. It doesn't change who they are. It changes who they are on a physiological level, and of course the blood drinking and the abilities. But really, if you were a good person, you're not going to automatically turn evil. You still have your free will. And I think in allowing people that turn into creatures that have all these abilities but still have free will, you're kind of shining a light and you're amplifying humanity in a way. You show, if you have all this power, what are you going to do with it? And the vampire allows you to show that with fangs and flying, or healing abilities, or other cool things, you know, pyrokinesis, telekinesis, whatever abilities you give your creatures. But at the end of the day, it's the same question. You have power, what do you do with it? And it's like I said, it's kind of a mirror that reflects back on all of us. So I think that's an enduring trope that you can use with vampires. You can use it with other creatures as well, but it shows who we are as people as well. And in contemporary settings, you can play with that same idea of you're an average person, but you're thrust into a supernatural world. Now what? How do you cope? What do you do?
I think that might be my favorite answer. They're a mirror to our humanity. That's it exactly. So you touched a bit on them being so enduring. So do you think that vampires are here to stay? Are vampires and vampire literature, whichever genre, here to stay? as far as you believe, Ilona and Gordon?
I think so. I mean, it's lasted many years. You could go all the way back to the original, you know, the novel, the play.
Before even that, to the folklore.
Yeah, to the folklore. I think, you know, obviously the novel brought it into Western culture more, and it really hasn't stopped. I mean, you know, well, not within our lifetime, but our grandparents' lifetimes, you know, Bela Lugosi, and then the Hammer films, you know, of the 60s and 70s. I don't think vampires go away. I think they just change depending on society at that point. You know, whatever people like. I still think there'll be some type of, you know, like you talked about the different things. I like the space vampires we do. There was a Western film many years ago about like vampires that were underground, and it was set in the Old West, and there were vampires. It wasn't Bone Tomahawk, it was something else. But I thought, like, yeah, people will always find a way to put vampires into whatever is their
Whatever setting, yeah.
whatever setting that they like, you know.
They speak to this really primal fear, and Jeaniene touched on that, where, you know, it is something waiting for you in the shadows, something that looks like you but isn't you. It's a predator.
Kind of uncanny valley.
Yeah, it's not one of us. It's something that will overpower you and deprive you of your blood, which we, you know, need to live. And it's just, and sometimes it's seductive, and sometimes it's just horrifying. And sometimes, you know, it's subtle and sneaky, but it's always kind of there. That myth persisted for literally thousands of years. I mean, it would be the height of arrogance of us to pronounce vampire as, you know, dead and done and gone. I just don't see it.
So we've kind of touched a little bit on this, but which one is your favorite portrayal of vampire in, you know, all of culture? Scarlett, I'm going to start with you because you made that really funny face.
Well, we were talking about what we do in the shadows earlier, and I just had so much fun watching that, and it was just an interesting take on vampires, because you did, like you mentioned Peter, like he's the sort of Nosferatu version of a vampire, and then they all sort of, you kind of got like the Vladish character as well, so you sort of see all of these different iterations of vampires throughout history, and it was like a wild, fun ride. So I did really enjoy that a lot.
Jeaniene, you're muted.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'll take it. I can't pick one. I mean, I'm an equal opportunity vamp lover. I love them when they're monstrous. You know, one of my favorite things I saw this year was Midnight Mass, and I thought it was just amazing. And the vampire is a monster. But you know, I love what we do in the shadows. Oh my gosh, and Guillermo. Oh, I love him to death too. And he's not a vampire, but anyways, if you don't watch that show, it's hilarious. I mean, I loved Vampire Diaries. You know, if it's got a vampire in it, I'm going to guaranteed watch at least one episode of it. So I love all the portrayals of them. I mean, I think it's so, and they're so versatile. You can make them all the way from sparkly to Salem Slot. And, you know, it's just such a fun creature to see all the different versions of it. And you know, when it's done well, it's great. I'll watch all of it. I couldn't pick my top 10, let alone my top 1.
And for you, Ilona and Gordon, you're allowed 2 answers.
Okay, so I will say about the one that I liked recently, because like Jeaniene, if it has a vampire in it, I'll probably watch it. So obviously the old ones, I really like the Lost Boys. I like the Lost Boys. I like the Fright Night. But recently, what is that movie? And I'm blanking up on the title. You know, the one where he's only.
Oh, okay, so there's a really good movie called He Never Died, starring Henry Rollins.
Yeah, we're not gonna spoil it. Don't see it.
He is a kind of vampire, and there's a great line for it. She asks, "How old are you?" And he says, "I don't know, but I was in the Bible." That helps.
If that
But
helps.
that's
No,
very Roland-y.
It is such
No, it's
a-
called He Never Died. It's
Yeah.
really good, guys. If you
it's
like
a
Henry
very
Rollins.
kind of very narrowly focused movie. Like it has a very small cast, but like I watched it and it like blew my socks off. I was so happy. I was
It's
like,
really
ah,
good. Like it's dark and funny.
yeah, and touching kind of in a weird way. It's just you have to watch it.
That's probably my recent.
Yeah, it's my recent favorite. You know, and he's a kind of vampire, so the kind.
Yeah.
So
I
all
bet
very
you-
interesting answers, all wrong, of course, because the best vampire is the Francis Ford Coppola Gary Oldman, but you know, valid.
Oh, there you go.
I did enjoy him. Like he is really great.
And then another super hard choice. If you could pick your favorite out of all the vampire kind of superpowers and myths around what they can do, or they can fly and they can shift, and the children of the night, the sweet music they make. I promised I wasn't going to do a bad Eastern European accent. Oh my God. Again, I'm going to start with Scarlett.
I always have to go first. What power would I want in all
Yes.
of them? I would want to control people's minds. That would be very interesting and creepy, like the creepiest power ever.
It depends on the people.
It's true.
I wouldn't mind controlling Jason Momoa one bit. Like,
Oh, I didn't go in that. I was like thinking of really. I should have gone like hotter. Okay, I messed up.
Jeaniene?
I mean, oh gosh, again, I guess maybe super speed, because if they move at a regular speed, that's not that scary. I mean, I think super strength kind of goes along with super speed as well, even though that's picking two. But yeah, if they're, like I said, there's something creepy about you turn around and someone who's 2 blocks away is now right in front of you, and it's been just less than a blink. So I love that. I love that about vampires.
Right. I could have sworn, like I would have put my hand in the fire that you were going to pick flying. So who am I to judge?
Oh, well, that's my dream. I'd love to do that.
Right. And Ilona and Gordon?
Oh,
It's the blood, isn't it?
I don't know. I guess if I had to pick a power, I would probably pick regeneration.
Right.
Is immortality, is that a power or is that a side effect?
Sure. Yeah.
You think?
I'll allow it.
Maybe because their bodies continuously regenerate, or if they don't age because they're dead. But I guess the idea of immortality would be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, it would be a blessing and a curse. Can you imagine having to try to figure out the problems of your great-children's great-children when they got arrested for some kind of pot?
Well, that's the idea, though, right?
Oh my
That goes
God.
back to like, well, I think it was Queen of the Dead, where one of the sisters was literally watching over her descendants.
Yes, like you would have to watch over the line, because let me tell you, once you have children cannot be trusted to like. Not
No, I
screw
can
up.
imagine. I'd be like,
Oh.
is each of you getting dumber every generation? Good Lord.
You would have nothing left in the house because, as we all know, children take everything.
Children take
Yeah.
everything, yes.
I'd be like, do I know you? Like, I'm so-and-so's great. You're like, oh, get the hell out of here. At this point, we're not even related.